Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining. I am Matt Stagner, here representing Voya Investment Management and the Voya Cares program. And our topic today is something that we're very passionate about at Voya. It's a big part of our culture, who we are, and what we do across the board, whether it's our investment management business, retirement, employee benefits, or through our advisors. Being inclusive of the disabilities and special needs community is part of who we are. So first, I want to define real quickly what we mean when we say financial inclusion. Financial inclusion, to me, is the full set of factors that helps to make sure that there's equal treatment for all people in our plans, whether it's people with disabilities that are employed at the companies we work with, or caregivers who are caring for someone in their lives that have a disability or special needs. Our ability to be inclusive of our offerings when it comes to retirement and investments and employee benefits, and offering access to great information and resources and advice is something that's really, really important and has been lacking over the years. So that's keep that in mind as we go throughout that theme of inclusion and think about how you can apply it in your day-to-day practices. Also think about how this community affects you. And we'll define what we mean by the special needs and disabilities community, but it really affects all of our lives. And hopefully you'll see as we go along how it touches your own life, because it's important when you're speaking about this community and you're speaking with people who are part of this community, that it comes from a genuine place and a place that shows that you understand and that you care about the issues that are important to these families. So we will cover that community in detail. We'll talk about how you can help as a DC advisor or retirement plan advisor, help your employers be more inclusive, and you can use that as a value add to help have a different type of conversation and to help improve your business. We'll talk a little bit about what employers can do to support their employees, and we'll give you some real practical tips on things that you can do today to get started. So we have a lot to cover, so we'll dive right in with a background on what we mean by the disabilities community and why is this an important one for us to be inclusive of. We speak about the disabilities community and the special needs community as the largest minority group in the United States, and really the only one that any of us could join at any time, expectedly or unexpectedly. 1 in 4 Americans will report having a disability at some point in their lifetime. 1 in 5 Americans currently assist with caregiving as an unpaid caregiver for a friend and family member in one form or another. Now, caregiving has a very broad definition as well. It's not what a lot of people think of a professional caregiver, but really family caregivers, people who help out with things like financial matters, the day-to-day errands, transportation, all of the little things that we do to support our loved ones that are so important. Now, if you add in the 1 in 4 that may have a disability, the 1 in 5 that are caregivers, there's also this group of 105 million of us that are touched in somewhere in our extended friends and family that have a disability, that have a special need, or that will at some point in their lifetime. You can start to see how this really affects every one of us, and therefore it also really affects everyone that you're talking to, whether it's a contacted an employer, a participant that they may have, maybe a company that works with people with disabilities or employs a lot of people with disabilities, or the specific person you're working with at that firm may have a situation in their life that if you can have a slightly different type of conversation and you can add a little bit of value, can really help your ability to maintain that relationship. We'll talk about the issues of caregivers that we've learned through some research that we sponsored at Voya Cares. But caregivers sometimes don't disclose that they're caregivers. And actually 75% of people with disabilities, those disabilities are invisible. So if they don't tell you they have a disability, you may not know. So if we're not asking the right questions as advisors about people's situation, whether they're a caregiver or they have a disability, we may not know, and we may miss something really important in the process. Family caregivers tell us they spend at least 32 hours a week providing care in addition to their day job. So this is a big time stressor. It's a big financial stress as well. We'll get into some of those details. And there's not a lot of support out there. We think this is a great opportunity for advisors because there's a real lack of quality information and quality advice. People in this community tell us that all the time. So what do we mean by people with disabilities There's actually 4 categories here, and 5 if you count caregivers. A lot of people automatically their mind goes to this first category: congenital conditions, those that are there from birth, things like Down syndrome, autism, cerebral palsy. This is what's traditionally thought of when you say special needs planning. You may be a financial planner or a financial advisor that works with a family where you're talking to the parents who have a child with a disability that's there from birth. But there are so many other types of disabilities that are also going through some similar issues throughout their life. One category is debilitating diseases or conditions that come on later in life and affect someone's ability to work. This could be MS, muscular dystrophy, or mental health, which is a big gray area, but a growing population of people that it's important that we understand and can help serve to the best of our ability. There's also those catastrophic events when someone goes through a portion of their life without a disability, and then something happens almost overnight, and they have a disability from there forward. It could be an accident, a stroke, a heart attack, a medical procedure gone wrong. It could also be a huge population of great importance to this country, military veterans who are young and able-bodied, go away to service and come home with a physical or a mental condition that affects their ability to work and affects their day-to-day life, and they have all of a sudden they have a whole new set of considerations that they have to incorporate into their plans. If you and your loved ones haven't been affected by one of these 3 categories, I guarantee you at some point in time, you will be affected by the last one, which is the issues that come along with aging, whether that's Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, dementia, or just general mobility disabilities that happen as we get older. So many of us need to plan ahead for our own potential disability, but also we're caring for aging parents or grandparents or spouses or even siblings in these situations. So think about this community very broadly in the sense that, again, it touches so many of our lives. And again, those caregivers that are providing full-time, part-time support from a distance or up close. It could be emotional, day-to-day, or financial in nature. So there's so many aspects of caregiving that are often unnoticed. And when you're planning for your retirement as a caregiver, you're maybe planning for yourself or your spouse, but also this third life, someone else that you need to make sure that's taken care of throughout your life and even after you're gone. So we'll get to a poll here real quick, but I also wanted to mention, be happy to take questions at the end of today's session. So if you have questions, please put them in the questions section, and I'll get to those as we wrap up. But Lisa, let's go ahead and start with our first poll here. I just want to take a pulse from the audience. Which types of disabilities that we just talked about have affected yourself, your family, or your friends? Any one of these 4, or more than one of the above. Let me know who's touched your life at this point. I'll give you a minute to tally your votes here. All right, looks like most of us know somebody in that aging category, as I suspected, but also a lot in the congenital category. Again, Down syndrome and autism. The diagnosis and the prevalence of especially of autism have really increased over the last few years. Thanks for sharing. I encourage you to think about your own personal connection to this community as we go throughout today, but also in your day-to-day practice and as you interact with people. So when we talk about special needs planning in general, when I work with a family, I want to make sure that all of their bases are covered, and it falls a lot into these 4 categories, some of which might be right in your wheelhouse and some of which may be something that's new to you. I don't expect everybody on this call to instantly become an expert in special needs planning after today. What we want to make sure that you understand is what some of these basic considerations are, where to find more information, and how to start the conversation. So family assets and planning is a lot of what we do already, right, as we're planning for people's retirement and investments. But with people in this community with disabilities and special needs, it's so important that we're able to make the most of what's available to the entire family, but also balance these sometimes conflicting needs of providing care in the short term and the long term to our loved one, but also planning for retirement and travel and purchasing new homes and all of the other goals that are so important to most families. Next, employer benefits. With so much of our lives being wrapped up in our work, employer benefits for the caregiver and for the loved one who may have a disability, may be a big part of the answer. Maybe a big part of the solution for life insurance, health insurance, retirement, other investments, HSAs, things like that. But also, we think ABLE accounts might be a big part of this answer as well. We don't get into too much detail about ABLE accounts, but if you haven't heard of them, it is a tax-deferred account similar to like a 529 educational account, but it can be set up for a person with a disability if that disability started prior to their 26th birthday, and they can put money away that's ultimately tax-free for a broad array of disability-related expenses without affecting their ability to apply and receive government benefits. So ABLE accounts, we think, have really started to gain some traction after their launch in 2014, but you'll be hearing more and more about those from Voya and others in the future. There's also, we note on here that we have a caregiver solution that we offer, but there are others like it. It's a possibility that an employer can offer some support to caregivers for their day-to-day needs. We work with a company called Wealthy. Your employers may have another solution like them, but the idea is anything that can take some of the day-to-day burden off of caregivers by helping coordinate care, find providers, apply for benefits when they need them. That can add a lot of value and really make your employees more present at work and present at work more often as well. Government benefits is what is really at the core of a lot of special needs plans. There's two main categories. So again, we won't dive in too much detail, but just want to point out there are two main categories of government benefits. So if somebody tells you they're on disability or they're receiving a disability payment, even if they say we're receiving Social Security because of a disability, it really requires us to dig down a little bit and find out, okay, what are we actually receiving, or what could we be eligible for if we're not receiving it at all? There are means-tested benefits, those things like SSI, which is supplemental security income, which is a basic income that is for people with very low income and very low assets. And also Medicaid, those two programs typically go together. It's an income benefit plus health insurance and long-term care insurance and supports that come through Medicaid. Then there's the entitlement benefits, which is actually the same as Social Security and Medicare that the general population would use, but also those aspects of Social Security disability insurance that could be available to a family member. If once you claim Social Security, your dependent with a disability may get a benefit called the childhood disability benefit, which is half of your full retirement amount once you claim your retirement benefit. So there could be some in each of these categories, but the big thing to note is those entitlement benefits are not means tested. There's not a $2,000 maximum on assets like you see on the means tested side. So we certainly can lead you to some more resources on government benefits, but that can be a big part of the equation. That's something that limits people's ability and their interest in saving and investing through things like 401k plans and HSAs through work or otherwise, because they're trying to make sure that they still qualify for the benefits that are so valuable to their family. And then finally, legal planning. Of course, estate planning is important for all of us. Wills, durable power of attorney, all those advanced directives that are important to every family, but it may be more important to these families with a loved one with a disability or special needs. We need to pay special attention to how beneficiaries are named on any type of account that may be named to a person with a disability or special need. Those beneficiary designations can really affect their ability to maintain benefits. And of course, special needs trusts are a big part of the equation as well. So if you're going to work in this space, it's good to have very well qualified attorneys in your area. We can always show you how to find those as well. All of those different considerations are applied at all different points throughout the life of a person with a disability or special need. I want to show you this slide without going into too much detail, but I'll hit you with a couple of the key turning points here that may affect your clients, the participants that you're working with, and it's good for them to know. So there's a lot that goes on prior to age 18. A lot of it's around services and IEPs and the school system. But age 18 is the first really, really critical turning point in the life of many of these families. At age 18, a young person becomes an adult legally, regardless of their capacity, and therefore parents need to have some plans in place at that point. They need to have some legal structure like a power of attorney or a guardianship document drawn up so that they can still help with that child's affairs even now that they're an adult. But it also changes the math around those government benefits that I just mentioned. So for those people who did not apply for Medicaid and SSI because the family has significant income or significant assets, at age 18, the family's income and assets no longer apply. It's solely based on the individual themselves. So with proper planning, if you have a child with a disability, you can set the stage for eligibility for SSI and Medicaid to start when they turn age 18. They can really provide essential cash flow, help you and your family save more for retirement, education, and really have so many of their other expenses potentially paid for. So there's a lot of planning that goes around age 18, and that transition is really important. The other one, of course, is retirement. The math around when to take Social Security, when to draw on a pension plan, when to turn on annuity income, and so many other retirement decisions are affected by the fact that you're planning for, again, not only a husband and wife or two spouses, but also potentially a third person or even more, depending on the makeup of your family. So the timing of claiming Social Security, for example, can make all the difference. Many times we encourage both spouses to wait as long as they possibly can because, as you probably know, you get up to an 8% credit each year that you wait to draw Social Security. But in these family situations, sometimes it makes sense for at least one of the spouses to claim as early as age 62, just to turn on a benefit that can benefit their child under that previously mentioned childhood disability benefit. So those turning points are really, really important in addition to those long-term beneficiary designation and those estate planning needs. So that's the quick overview of special needs planning. Again, we could spend a lot more time on that, but I just wanted to give you sort of a quick introduction to some of the key aspects of it. And let's talk a little bit about what your role as an advisor or a financial professional may be, and also how employers can help their employees. So we think that this community is underappreciated or underserved in a lot of ways, partially because we're just not aware of how many people that we're working with are in this situation. So just raising awareness, helping understand those categories of disabilities, the breadth of this community, I think can make a difference in how our employers see their workforce and how they address that workforce. We've noted that most benefits and financial products and investments were not necessarily designed for this community. It's really our role as financial professionals to help translate how we can apply and make the most of what's available. And then finally, as I mentioned before, I think this can make a big difference in your business if you can provide resources, support, just knowing acknowledging this community, helping them know where to go for information. It can be a difference maker in your business because it's a different kind of conversation. Everybody has a 401k plan. Everybody has similar investment offerings and pricing. Sometimes the difference can be if you understand issues that are important to them and you show that level of understanding and care when you're having the conversation with your clients, that can make all the difference when everything else is a little bit commoditized. And we talk about the different solutions and how they can be applied to this community. Really, for financial planning, the same basic needs apply for people in this community as to the general population. The need to do a financial plan, to save, to invest, to have stable and reliable income in retirement. Some of those needs are greatly enhanced, and there are some specific solutions that you can offer, or that your employers can offer, that can directly address some of these needs. I won't read through all these lists with you, but I mentioned before ABLE accounts, special needs trust. There's a handful of these specific solutions that are designed for this community, but also, as you'll see in our research, caregivers have told us that being a caregiver for a loved one with a disability certainly makes them more aware of the need for disability insurance and long-term care insurance. They want to make sure that they're planning for their own future needs of care so that they're not a burden on somebody else in their family. So it's important that we are able to sort of make that connection and translate those important benefits to our families. A little bit about our research. What we did in this specific study is reach out to caregivers in the workplace and employees with a disability in the workplace. There's a white paper and some corresponding materials that you can have access to. But the bottom line is we wanted to see, as we assumed, that caregivers are under a little bit more stress at work because of time and financial stress related to being a caregiver, and how that translated to their demand for help and demand for benefits. And as you can see here, the stresses are both of a physical nature and emotional nature, using their own sick time to provide care, stress and anxiety, limited time to do things for themselves, trouble sleeping. We also saw weight gain, tobacco use, and smoking to deal with the stress that comes along with being a caregiver. There's also some specific financial impact from this group. Caregivers told us on average they're spending at least $825 per month providing care to their loved ones, and they're cutting back on their own expenses, their own wants and wishes to provide care, to make sure there's enough money there for their loved one. So it causes them to dip into savings, delay purchases, to take loans and distributions from their retirement accounts. Those financial effects are made even worse or even more magnified when it affects their career. 56% said they cut back on hours, 31% left a job for a more supportive employer, and 22% quit the workforce entirely because of the demands on caregiving. Those numbers really are impactful when you think about it from the employer's perspective. Turnover costs employers a great deal because, as you probably know, 150% of the annual salary or more is what it costs to replace an employee as opposed to retaining one. And so the replacement cost, the productivity loss, and that time spent on caregiving, some of that time ends up being during work hours. It's really inevitable. It really impacts the bottom line of employers. Now, none of this research suggests that employers should not hire people with disabilities or hire people that are caregivers. In fact, it was quite the opposite. It is really astounding numbers around increased revenue and profit margins for employers that employ best practices around disability inclusion. They outperform their peers across the board. So it is an important topic for employers, not just for their employees. So the research that we showed came up with some really specific suggestions for employers on benefits. Some of them, again, obvious: more paid leave, paid caregiver leave, flexible time off, understanding, flexible schedules and working from home. More benefits around ABLE accounts, legal benefits, and some of those other things that are important, like long-term care and disability benefits, were certainly in higher demand. But what we came up with is not only a white paper, so the full research report's available, some infographics that give you some of these statistics at a glance, but also a checklist, to-do items that your employers can start with right away. Sort of foundational in getting started and working with this community, we suggest people first language is something that you can practice today and start practicing at home and really employ in your conversations going forward. So what is people first language? Just like it sounds, putting the people first and foremost, not the disability or the diagnosis, describing a person as who they are, not what they have. Some examples are up here on your screen, but I think this is just really important. Again, the basics, to make sure that you're speaking the language, that you're being as respectful as you can and understanding of a person's situation, and trying to be just up to date with how we refer to this community, because it is important. And people will let you know whenever you get it wrong. So with that, let's do another quick poll, and just to see, how much of this resonates with you, or how many of you are already practicing people first language. The poll that's up there: which of these is not appropriate language? You have a cheat sheet on your screen right now, but which of these is not appropriate people first language? My child is bipolar. He is on the autism spectrum. She's a talented singer who's also deaf. They have a Downs kid, or he uses a wheelchair. Which of those is not in preferred people first language? One of quick note while we go through this poll, I give you a chance to answer, is it's important, we think, to model the best practices when it comes to this language, but not necessarily correct a family if they refer to their kid in a certain way or their loved one in a certain way. It's really for us to do our best to show respect for this community, and show that we're involved and that we care. So looking at the poll results so far, it looks like everybody's getting it right. They have a Downs kid. You can see there the Down syndrome or the diagnosis is put ahead of the person in that sentence, and therefore it's not ideal. The rest of these are okay. On the autism spectrum is sort of the updated term for an autistic kid or an autistic person. Talented singer who's also deaf. You can do a search for Mandy Harvey as an example here. We've done some work with her. She's an amazing singer who lost her hearing as a teenager. So this is how she refers to herself, as someone who is deaf. And using a wheelchair as opposed to being confined or stuck in a wheelchair, just a more positive language there is preferred. All right. So how can we help? Becoming an information resource. Again, you don't have to be the expert on every one of these topics, but just being able to help people know where to go to find information. We have a lot of this information on our website at voyacares.com. Right now I'll put out a link in the call to action that will give you some really specific information. Some of our more popular PDF pieces that you can download and use with clients. We'll put all on one link, and I'm sharing that with you now. Ongoing training and education, webinars, workshops, courses. Right now, everybody's working from home, so these Zoom type webinars have been very popular and very useful to reach broad groups of employees and employers. Having an understanding, again, around beneficiary planning. I think that's a great touch point for everybody on the call, is to start when someone's naming a beneficiary in the first place on any type of account that has a beneficiary named, whether it's a retirement account, a life insurance policy, an HSA, a TOD or a POD, anything where you're naming a beneficiary, just ask the question, does anybody that you're naming as a beneficiary have a disability or a special need? If the answer to that question is yes, we'll want to make sure that they understand the consequences of naming that person directly, and they consider things like a special needs trust as an alternative in order to make sure that that person can keep their government benefits. It's also great for beneficiary updates and client update meetings. If you're looking for topics to cover in your annual reviews and updates, it's a great time to ask that question as well. We do have some downloadable resources I mentioned at the link I just shared. You can find many of these case studies and white papers that we have available through our website that can help support these types of conversations. We've tried to keep things simple, but some of our more popular pieces include our planning checklist, which is a really beginning to end look at what families should be considering doing. It's a great touch point to see what they've done so far and what they might want to consider doing if they haven't yet got around to it. And I mentioned the employer research and the checklist we have. We also have a checklist for advisors. Reach out to your contacts at Voya. We can share this with you as well. Gives advisors and financial professionals some great tips on how to get involved, how to support this community, how to better support your clients. As we wrap up right around the top of the hour here and get to your questions, just as a reminder, this community is significant in numbers and in scope and in breadth. Make sure that we're understanding of that. We're helping our employers understand that, and we're really helping make sure that they don't feel as overlooked as they have in the past, that we're providing good, reliable information and resources that is so hard to find for some of these families. You'll have better performance amongst your employees. That whole idea of attracting, retaining good quality talent and supporting them. To do that, you've got to be inclusive of the disabilities and special needs community more broadly. And really, this can be part of that value proposition you have as a financial professional. We at Voya Cares and Voya Investment Management certainly appreciate the partnership with all of you. And if there's anything that we can do to help support this part of your business, your clients, your employers that may have special situations that you want to talk through, please reach out to us. Definitely reach out through our website and learn more at voyacares.com. So with that, just a reminder, if you have questions, I'd love to go through those with you. Please type them in the questions section, and I'll be glad to answer those one by one. If there's some that we can't get to or that are more personal in nature, we're happy to do that offline as well. First question is, I think always the first question on any webinar is when are the slides and whether the slides will be available. Slides are available. I'll sort of defer to the team here on that one, Lisa. If you have instructions on how to get those slides, that'd be great. Looks like we're getting a reply to that one live on the screen. Other questions that come up quite often, I do get a lot of questions from advisors who, like many of us, work with group plans, and you're not providing personal financial planning services. So if you're somebody who only works with employers, some of these topics get very personal in nature, and they're very focused on the participant and supporting that participant. So I always get questions from advisors on how do we support employers in these efforts. And again, we think that there's a lot of value in bringing up the topic with employers, helping provide resources, helping review sort of what their overall offering is, and how to help support their employees by just, again, adding value, being a resource navigator is a term you'll hear us use, where we can provide links to really important information and how to apply and where to go for more information. Another question about special needs trust versus ABLE accounts. So when the ABLE accounts were introduced, there were a lot of people who wondered, do we really need this if we have a special needs trust? The attorney groups weren't sure at first, but really we see ABLE accounts and special needs trust as both really viable solutions that can be used together in a lot of ways. One of the most common setups that I have with families is an ABLE account for short-term needs to take advantage of tax benefits, for ongoing savings and even ongoing spending. And then you can use a special needs trust as part of an estate plan for the family to make sure that there's money there in the long term for this generation and the next. So that's always a good question. And then again, I think there's definitely room for both. They each have their own advantages and disadvantages. All right. Any other questions? Again, feel free to type in the questions section. Okay. Well, with that, seeing no other additional questions, I certainly hand it back to wrap up. Very much appreciate your time today. Certainly reach out to your Voya contacts and to our website for more information. Very happy to help out. And again, I really appreciate the partnership with all of you here today. So thanks again.